Do you consider yourself to be a starving artist? Are you guilty of accepting low or no wages just to have a specific name or brand on your resume? Or are you an instructor at a dance studio and ever wondered why you're not entitled to certain government perks like holiday, overtime, or vacation pay? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then this episode is for you. This is Season 2, Episode 2, Number 35, with Nissrine Shuman. Hello everyone, and thank you again for joining us on another episode of Season 2 of the Unplugged podcast presented by Dance Plug Canada. My name is Rory Minozo, and I am a former dance studio manager turned dance entrepreneur and advocate. Each week we bring you a guest or guests who talk about their experiences working in the industry along with some valuable insight and opinions about hot topics in our community. Now, as some of you may know, this year we are placing an emphasis on the business of dance, and this episode is jam-packed with tons of information to help you make informed decisions when it comes to having financial literacy. Before we get into our episode, here are a few events that are happening in the city later this month. The Toronto Argonauts A-Team auditions take place on Sunday, March 15th at Canada's National Ballet School at 400 Jarvis Street. For more information, you can visit them on Instagram at Argos A-Team or by visiting their website at www.argonauts.ca. Prelude Toronto returns to Cardinal Carter Theatre on March 21st. Come and see one of North America's top urban dance competitions featuring talent from the Greater Toronto Area and from our neighbors to the south in the U.S. Tickets are available online through Eventbrite by searching on Prelude Toronto, and for more information you can also visit their Instagram at Prelude Toronto. The following day, Funk Rockosm, the Mississauga Street Dance Summit, goes down at the Living Arts Centre from 4 to 10. The event features a stage showcase, live performances, booth installations, and a 7 Samurai cipher and more. The event is free and fun for all ages. For more information, you can visit at 7 Samurai LAC on Instagram. This week, we sat down with financial director Nissrine Shuman. She's a professionally trained dancer who has both CPA and ACCA designations with over a decade worth of experience working in creative industries. She provides financial stewardship and also creates a bridge between artists and the finance world. In her episode, we talk about the difference between being an employee and an independent contractor, the importance of financial literacy and why you need it to survive in a capitalist society, and what is the most valuable commodity a dancer possesses. Like we said earlier, this episode is jam-packed with tons of information to help you make informed decisions, so we do suggest having a pen and paper ready or a notebook to take some notes. We're really excited for you to hear what she has to say. So without further ado, this is Season 2, Episode 2, Number 35, with Niss Shuman. Recording from Everything Anisha Studios in the heart of the Stockyards District here in Toronto. I'm joined by Financial Director Nissrine Shuman. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. I think this is a conversation that a lot of artists definitely need to hear because it's something that, well, one, obviously it's very important, but two, I think a lot of artists in general can benefit from because there is lack of financial literacy when it comes to dealing with, certain things in the industry. 100%. And there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to talk about in this episode, which I hope will kind of open, your eyes, especially if you're listening to this, because a lot of it indirectly or directly affects you.
Yes.
So we hope at the end of this episode, you are more financially aware. And you can take some things home with you and start to get you guys like thinking about the current situations that you're in, how to maybe put yourselves in better situations. And even if you don't, and you still want to question some of the things that are said in this podcast, we'll make sure that you have the proper tools and resources to get a hold of Niss or myself.
Yeah, let's go.
So why don't you tell us a bit about your history? Were you a dancer growing up? How did you get into finance?
So I just recently moved from UK, London. I've been here for almost a year now. Back there, I was a head of finance, and I have been a head of finance for creative industry for over a decade. And the reason why I picked creative industries is because I myself was brought up in a creative background.
Nice.
My mom being a choreographer herself, her full-time job was dancing. And so I've been very much involved in the dance community. I've been myself been professionally training for over a decade as well. So that's why I got into creative industry, and I love dealing with artists.
Has accounting always been something that you held on to career-wise? Like, why get into it?
No, it was dancing. I wanted to be a full-time dancer, but because of the difficulties that my mom faced in this career and my culture that takes dancing as seriously, my mom advised me to go into something that would have a better future for me. So luckily enough, I was very passionate about numbers and math and accounting and business. The business world itself was I was very passionate about the whole concept of a business world. So I got into that, and I combine the two passions together. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your qualifications before we get into any of this financial stuff. So you are a part of a couple of professional designations, correct?
Yes, I'm a chartered professional accountant of Ontario. So I became a member of the CPA Ontario. And I'm a member of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. And globally, it's a designation that you take in the UK, but it's very global. And I have a BS in accounting. So yes.
Very nice. Now, to start things off, how important would you say financial literacy is for artists?
Financial literacy is important for everybody, but mainly for artists because of the fact that we are in a capitalist country, and understanding the mechanisms of finances, whether it's on a personal level or a business level, is massively important because artists are pretty much left on their own, and most of the time they tend to be contractors. So knowing how to deal with that is key to survive in the industry that they're in. Mm-hmm.
Perfect segue into the next question. So you had mentioned both employees and independent contractors. Can you talk about the difference between the two?
So yes, the difference between being a contractor and an employee is mainly the risk associated with both and whoever is calling the shots on your job. So an employee would not have any say with the business. So they wouldn't really get much involved in how the business is set, who's setting the rates, for instance, in a dance studio, how much do customers pay to come to your classes, when are your classes are happening, how long your classes are, and how much you are getting paid. So the employer is the one who's calling all these shots. However, if you're a contractor, you are logistically responsible for all of these. So you get to say how much you charge people. You get to say how much you get paid. You get to say where and when. That said, the risk associated for the employer is the government has set a set of laws that protects an employee, because employees don't have much of a say in what's happening around them. So the government said, right, you have a minimum wage to pay. You have to pay your employees their holiday. And then if they're sick, you have to pay them for that as well. However, on the other side, contractors don't get that luxury. But because they are responsible for their own decisions when their business, how to run their business, etc. Mm-hmm. So these are the two main advantages and disadvantages of being contractor and self-employed.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting because a lot of, and I don't know if there are any instructors that are listening to this right now, when Niss was explaining the employee segment of it, a lot of it sounds very, very familiar. Based on those circumstances, you are theoretically listed or supposed to be on paper an employee to that business.
Yes.
However, a lot of these businesses categorize you as independent contractors. Can I get your thoughts on that? Like, by the way, like, why do you think, like, other than the fact that, you know, businesses would rather take less risk, you know, when determining their faculty becoming employees and independent contractors, what are your thoughts on that? Why do you think businesses are more reluctant to hire contractors rather than employees?
Because of the fact that the law very much supports an employee. However, let me just go back to that point. The legality of things, you can't, in the nature of the nature of the employment to be an employee-employer relationship, and act with them as contractors, that actually defies the whole point that the government put all these laws. So it's kind of illegal. And I would say if the CRA knows about this, they will be on their cases, and they will give these studios, for instance, a big fine. Because if a business is setting the strategy on you, and whatever risk associated, it's because of those studios setting those strategies. So it seems a bit unfair that you're not taking any of the perks of being a contractor, because you're not setting your own rates, you're not setting anything, you're not making any decision except for what you're teaching, and yet you're paying your own tax and handling everything that comes with it, which is you're not even being paid a holiday. If you're ill, nobody's paying for your pay. So I'm very surprised that businesses are doing that and getting away with it, because if they get a CRA audit, I think they will be fined. And I think teachers are being used as such. It's a bit disappointing to hear that.
Yeah. Now, have you asked any of your friends who are teachers why they allow things like this to happen?
I've had conversations. So I have some of my friends that actually teach, and I have some of my friends that decided that they're not doing that because of what I just said.
Yeah.
Not because of what I told them, but that they already made that decision themselves, and they're doing very well. And it kind of surprises me, the things that I hear. The fact that they say, oh, but for instance, there was a conversation once that happened in a town hall when the rates of one of the studios, the drop-in rates went up. And it was something ridiculous, like 28.5. And there was a conversation that happened. And I went to it because I was very intrigued. And I thought the argument that was made was very presumptuous, because the argument was, okay, we are increasing the rates because we want more retained clients. And there's a lot of assumptions in that statement, because you're assuming that you're the only studio in town. Me and you know that there's at least, 6, 7, 8, name it. So one, you're assuming that customers have no choice but to come to your studio if they want to take a class. And they're going to become retained, as in like go with the subscription. Everybody took that on face value. And that's what was surprising to me. It's like, is that really the case though? That's what I really want to know. And when that happens, and the argument was, so because of that, you're going to get more heads in your classes, you're going to get more clients, so you're going to be paid more. I thought, that's not true, but I really want to know right now if that's true. So I would want instructors to message you, please, and tell you if 4 months down the line, 5 months down the line, are they getting more people in the classes? Because I think there's a lot of assumptions in that statement. So the things that I've noticed as well when it comes to the whole relationship between studios and teachers is that belief that the business owners know better than us and about what's really important to us. And I think if that's a bit insulting to the intelligence of teachers, because when I was again in that town hall, I was a bit annoyed because the conversation was very like, oh, there is inflation, oh, there is a cost. And to be honest with you, this is what I do for a living. And many things that were said in there, they weren't supported as such. And then for some reason, everybody just took it for face value and said, okay, whatever they're saying is fine, and we believe them, instead of holding them accountable. I mean, like, okay, where are the support to what you're saying, really? And by the way, why are you making the decisions for me when I'm a contractor? Because you shouldn't be making that decision. And if you're making that decision, and I'm going to end up having less students because of that decision that you made, you need to at least have my rights covered, have a minimum wage below which I can't go. So because that's what's really selling those teachers going to those studios, is because they're like, although we don't get paid an hour or an hour and a half the same way, we are getting paid per head. So is your per head really increasing? And if it's not, based on the decision that they made, as a contractor, you need to say something.
Yeah. Do you think that businesses would be able to sustain itself by only renting out the space?
Yes, they would survive, definitely. I mean, being in a capitalist society, and that's again a business strategy, you can't just open a business and decide that one product or one thing that you do is going to bring you money. So that becomes strategical, right? So for the survival of the business, considering that we have many studios around. But regardless of what your strategy is as a business, that's up to you. It's unethical to use and abuse teachers like the way it happens sometimes. And I'm not trying to create some kind of revolution here, and I'm not trying to do anything. I just think that many dancers and teachers need to take a stand more. And I recall when I first came here, I listened to your podcast with Leon Blackwood, and he was talking about the same subject because he was a victim of this. And I mean, it's been a long time, but I still recall the main points behind that. And what ended up happening is, even though a person who is very well respected in the industry and powerful in that matter was standing there alone. And it goes to show that one hand cannot clap, and dancers need to be more of a community and start saying no to being abused in that way. And that's what, unfortunately, the point I was trying to get at when I was in a town hall didn't really prevail like that, unfortunately. But it's dancers coming in as a community and deciding to be like, okay, enough is enough. We need to decide our own fate. And if they don't want to decide our fate for us, let's change the nature of our contract. So we become, you know what, it's fine. You want to set everything. You want to impose rates. You want to do all the strategy. Good on you. It's your business. But let's change the nature of our contract, because legally you have to change it. Legally you have to pay me when I'm sick. Legally you have to not pay me less than $14, $15 an hour, etc. These things really need to be discussed, and dancers need to come together, because no one, I mean, Leon Blackwood can do it on his own, and he's such a powerful, respected man, you know?
And I think that's a great point you make. I think what you're trying to get at is getting the artist to understand what kind of power they actually hold.
Exactly. There is nothing more important. I mean, the business wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the staff and the creative and the artists in there. Because what are you really going to be selling anyway? That's exactly what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So if dancers and teachers realize how strong they are and important they are, and the fact if everybody, for instance, decided one day to leave, that business wouldn't make any money.
Yeah.
It's quite important point to make, because businesses take for granted that dancers don't realize that. And I'm sorry I'm saying just dancers, because we're talking about dancers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's artists in general, but I think it happens more with dancers. I know many musicians, I know many actors, and they don't have this happening in their community as much as it does with the community of dancers.
I think one thing that we can agree upon is that being deeply invested in money management often feels very uncreative. And many artists get comfortable with keeping their understanding of financial literacy as vague as possible. And for example, like, if I don't see it, it never happened. And that's the kind of approach that most people like to take. What would you say are some of the most absolute basics an artist needs to know when handling their own finances?
Well, artists need to realize that they're entrepreneurs. They own a business that needs to have a strategy and a market. And the product that they're selling is time. And the way that time is being perceived by stakeholders and by themselves is their branding. And if we take this whole idea and trying to dissect it, the challenge that many artists have is they are in this dilemma where, for some reason, back in the day, some business person decided to convince artists in general, that money making and being an artist are two different things, and they don't have anything to do with each other. You as an artist don't need to be starving to become a real artist. And realizing that you are actually an entrepreneur, and the product that you're doing is time. And I need to really, really fixate on the term time. Time is the one commodity that artists can do, and it's the most valuable thing that they have. It's like coffee to Starbucks. When you go to an artist as a business person, as an outsider, you go to artists to buy their time. Now, how you place that time, that's your branding. And it's quite interesting that you see a lot of artists and dancers treating that time in a very invaluable way. Like, you wouldn't see Starbucks throwing its coffee and giving it for free. However, you do see dancers giving their time for free. And they're like, oh, but I'm doing it for the love of it. Yes, you're doing it for the love of it, but you need to survive. And if you keep doing what you're doing and not having money to eat or pay your rent, you're going to stop what you love doing and you're going to do something that you really don't like doing. So it's a double-edged sword, and putting value on your time is what's going to define you as an artist. And I'll give the example of Footnotes. I'm a Footnotes member. Very proud Footnotes member, actually. I recall when we first started, when I auditioned for Footnotes, and the things they were doing when it comes to time and the value of their time was so imposed on us that I thought about it as a business person, and I was like, wow, Pyro and Glizzy do know what they're doing. Because before we entered the room, they told us that we had to audition to be part of Footnotes. We had to do an interview to be part of Footnotes. We have to sign a contract to be part of Footnotes. And in the contract, there are things like, if you're late 10 minutes, I think, or even 5 minutes, you do 80 push-ups. The amount of holidays or sick are very limited. And what this was saying to us at the back was how important their product is, which is time. And we were constantly, not in a pretentious way, told our time is valuable indirectly through all of this barriers. Yeah. Our time is valuable. You want to be here. You're going to value our time and value your time as an artist. Otherwise, you don't really need to be here. And valuing your time doesn't just mean, and this is a perfect example to say that valuing your time doesn't just mean monetary wise, because even though technically what we were paying to be part of Footnotes wasn't what I'm pretty sure Pyro or Glizzy charge, but the implications, the investment that they were doing gave us the persona that this is important. So you had the first day till now, people, the moment they step foot in that studio, it's training mode, it's working hard, it's drilling, it's fundamentals, and you see the energy in that room is just different. And that just because artists have said to you, my time is very valuable, don't waste it. You want to take my time, you better respect that. And that's what makes them what they are.
I do want to touch briefly on one thing that you had mentioned earlier about, I guess, the starving artist mentality. Why do you think that a lot of artists in today's society, not care about the business side of it? And why do you think that their mentality is more so 80%, I guess, the creative side and 20% business?
Many artists and creative people are not taught these things. They're not taught to think that way. And obviously there is that stereotype, right, of the starving artist. So that doesn't help either. So for some reason there is that persona that if you're an artist and you're doing things and you're making a lot of money and you're treating your craft as a business, then you're not really true to yourself. However, if you really look at all the inspirational people in this industry, and I'm going to talk about Toronto, and I'm going to talk about the people that I personally have experience with, people like George Jones or Angela Mahoney or Pyro, Glizzy, Shavar, these people treat their craft as a business and they brand it, and their time is very much respected, and they strategize. And what they do, they're the most inspirational people I know. That doesn't make them any less of an artist than another one who's starving. If anything, they contribute to this community so much. Shavar comes up with opportunities for a lot of dancers. Same that does George, same for Angela, same for Pyro, same for Glizzy. These people are able to bring money because of the way they deal with their artistry that it actually inspires the community within, and it elevates them and their standards.
100%.
So I agree with you. There's a lot of that going on around. And then you have the idea of lowballing, which I think is very toxic. It harms the community and it needs to stop. When you're lowballing, you're giving the idea that your time, the product, your iPhone for Apple, that's your product, right? So that's our product as artists, the time. You're giving the idea to outside people that this time is not as valuable. And if you're really good as a dancer, technically trained, and you do that, you're harming more your community. So you're giving the world the idea that this is what it costs for a dancer. There's this amazing incident that happened with me in one of the advertising and creative industry I was working in. We had a massive event for a very big brand with a punchy budget. So the budget was pretty high. And part of my job was checking that budget and making sure everything is okay. I looked at it and I saw the line for a dancer. It was around 6 dancers, and the event was taking place over the weekend. And it was paying a dancer £50, which is the same spending power of a $50 here in Toronto. They were paying a dancer £50 a day. And out of curiosity, I called the project manager and I said to him, you do realize you've put £50 a dancer a day? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, on what basis? And he said to me, it's what they charge. And I was like, right, okay. Is it though? And he said, yeah, I've dealt with dancers before and this is how much they charge. And obviously the event happened, and he did find dancers that accepted the £50 a day. And I said to him, and I asked him afterwards, I was like, did they explain to you that that's not really what it costs? And he said, no, they didn't say anything. And I explained to him, I had to explain to him. And this is the point about lowballing, because this guy whose job actually as a project manager is to know the cost of things, thinks that a dancer who's going a full-on weekend for a couple of hours, 50 is ridiculous. Yeah. And many dancers, they don't, it's fine, you know, we all done our fair share of free jobs. But see, the moment you start valuing your time as your product, that's when you know that be careful how you're spending it and see what you're getting in return. And my guess is those dancers wanted that brand in their portfolio because it was a very massive brand. However, there should be an education happening to people outside of a creative industry, telling them how much it really costs and why you're really doing it, because we need to stop other people, clients, thinking that this is really what it costs, and because it destroys, because it's never going to elevate, we're never going to change. The article about artists being, in Toronto, they get paid an average of $30,000 a year. That's obnoxious. And the fact being is because why assume that people that are not creative would understand the fact that it takes you before you even do the business, before you even go and do that little dance or little piece of music, you have to practice. You have to hire probably a studio to teach other people. That's time. If your time is costing at least $14, which is the legal cost, the minimum wage for, then you've lost a lot doing that. And it's fine to build up your portfolio and have content, but make sure you explain it like Pyro and Glizzy explained it to us. They're like, we're not charging a lot because we want to teach you fundamentals, but that doesn't mean our time is not valuable. It doesn't have to be monetary, but the concept of lowballing is just, I keep saying it's so destructive. It's the main reason why many artists struggle.
Now, earlier you were talking about budgeting, and one particular budget that I'd like to talk about in particular is the 50-30-20 budget, which splits the numbers into 3 different things. So your obligations, your discretionaries, and your savings. Can you describe our listeners the power behind that kind of budget?
Yeah, so I like that concept because it sets a bit of a formula to work towards. Obligations being the things that you need to your minimum survival needs, so eating, rent, etc.
Yep.
Discretionary would be things like you make a decision to pay for, as in, like, for instance, training in classes, doing going to the gym, or etc. Like things that they're not necessarily things that you can't live without, but there are things you made a decision to pay for. And the savings is basically savings. Like, yeah. When it comes to artists and that, it's a bit hard because they don't have consistent flow of income. So it becomes more tricky for them to be, if they're being paid in 2 weeks, they're being paid quite a lot, and then suddenly the money stops, then it's quite hard for them to be like, okay, how are we going to budget on that basis, because they don't know when the next flow of money is going to come in.
Yeah.
So it becomes a bit tougher. But my advice would be, from that perspective, is to look at it from your own strategy, because right now I'm speaking as if everybody just listened to me and went and thought of themselves as this business who has a strategy, and they are based on that strategy, as in, like, where do you really see yourself in the future? Obviously, your minimum payment of things that you need to pay for, you need to take that into consideration and not even think about it. But when it comes to things that your discretionary stuff, and I see these stuff as investment of time, again, the product being the time, how are you getting back what you're really paying for? How much is it really helping you in your business? Because you are a business. So what are you really getting back? If you're investing in this training and you got a couple of jobs, or your technique became better, that made sure that you got more auditions out of it, then that's what you should keep on doing, and maybe doing more of. And then that's when the 20% might not necessarily be 20%, and it would be, the 30% might not necessarily be 30%, and it might be slightly more, because you're getting something in return. Now, when it comes to savings, I think savings is a bit of a passive way. Savings is a bit of a passive way of putting your money. One needs to make sure that their money is working for them even when they're sleeping, and that's the mentality of rich people, or billionaires, that self-made, not rich people, but like people that make it in life, and they become rich, is because they always ensure that their money is working for them and not vice versa. They're not working for money. And Grant Cardone has this amazing sentence. He's a millionaire, and he says, "Who got my money?" So this is a concept of not let's go hang around with rich people and hope they will give us some cash. Is the concept of go and network with people that they would be able to pay for whatever service you're providing, right? And not to sound that I'm deviating from the subject, but when it comes to savings, I would think it would rather be more of an investment, and making sure that that you are bringing in the money, rather than bringing in the inflow of money before you decide how you need to manage it internally. And what I've noticed in the dance community, there's an internal circulation of money and no external. And the external inflow of money is coming from the 10% of people that have really made it in the industry. And it needs to be more of that, because your biggest paycheck is not going to come from your peer dancer. It's going to come from clients outside. So your networking needs to expand to more than being your networking, your business, your opportunities need to expand to more than being internally and becoming externally. And this, to me, should be something that every artist needs to think about. How am I going to expand my business, to strategize it, to ensure there is an inflow of money so I can control that money more and make it work for me as such. So it's an interesting idea of the inflow, because you have so many people doing programs, and it's fine to do programs, but don't make that your mainstream of money, because as we just discussed, and many articles talk about, artists are not making enough. So how do you expect to be making more than average artist of 30,000 a year if you're expecting that your money's coming from another artist rather than it coming from people from the outside and injecting that cash from the outside?
Mm-hmm. Next thing I want to talk about is investing. Why do you think investing is important for artists as independent contractors? Because I think there are different kinds of investments, and they're not always going to be monetary, especially when it comes to artists.
Many artists, their income is not consistent and it's very seasonal. Because it's very seasonal, they need to look at things from an investor point of view rather than just flowing around. So what I'm saying is, for instance, how do investors look at things? Investors think, right, what are the risks associated? What are my seasons? If I have a risk somewhere, they try to close that risk from that side. So for instance, if a dancer notices that they are making so much money during the summer, but their business is not going very well in the first 3 months of the year, January, February, March, then they need to start thinking from that perspective how they would invest, for instance, do a lot of workshops, do a lot of open a lot of businesses and make a lot of money, abuse the fact that the money, people are doing activities during the summer more than during the winter, and get in more money, and then maybe in the winter invest your time in training and coming up with ideas and networking, so that in the summer you're ready to do that again. So it becomes like a diversification kind of point of view, where people sell ice cream in the summer and then soup in the winter. I don't know. I just made that up. But yeah, when it comes to investment, for dancers to ensure that they're diversifying and they're being very wise. And another thing, when it comes to training, everyone has their own experience when it comes to training. It's nice to be someone who's skilled in everything, but clients and people in general, they want to box you. That's human nature. But that doesn't mean that they're being judgmental, more than they want to understand what is it that you really want. And when somebody is thinking of hiring, you want to be the first person that pop in their head. And the way you're going to do that is by you concentrating and differentiating yourself as a brand. And from that point being said, it's very important to take that to your training and try to train accordingly. So if, for instance, I'm a street dancer and suddenly I start doing contemporary and paying so much money, it's good to enhance my technique in contemporary and ballet, but knowing how much money I'm investing in contemporary and ballet versus street dancing is very important as well. And it goes, again, to my basic, my strategy, my product, being my time, how I need to spend it, invest it, where. And money starts becoming something associated with that rather than it being the mean itself, as in like the thing itself.
Yeah. What are some things you think artists should get into the habit of when it comes to dealing with their own personal or business finances?
Changing their mindset about who they are, and the fact that they're entrepreneurs, as I said, having the mentality of a business person. And seeing that and realizing, right, if that's what people want to do, then how are we going to get there? Who are the right people to network with? It becomes more of expanding the horizons of how we think about things. And it all starts from a simple idea of a strategy and a market. What's our strategy? What's the market? Who are our targets? How are we making those people that we decided that their market, how are we making them see us as a time? But yeah, so things like that would help you differentiate yourself in the market and open opportunities and network. And then that way you would ensure that you have the right inflow of money from the right people. Go and seek out who has your money. It's a very important concept. And then when you have that, the 50, 30, 20 would actually work. And your whole way of thinking about the mechanisms of money would change, because you're not thinking as me, you're thinking as what the business of Niss needs, what's the business of Roy needs, you know? It becomes different mindset of how you look at things, if that makes sense.
100%. Now, to close things off, last season, I asked the same question at the end of every single episode. And this season, I decided to switch it up. So if there was one challenge you would give dancers in the new year, what would it be and why?
I would challenge dancers to stand up for themselves when it comes to the rates they're being paid for. Because it's such a shame seeing, especially in Toronto, especially spending so many times with dancers, such a shame seeing how much hard work is being put into their training, because they do, and the talent they have and the creativity is unreal. And I've been in LA and I've been in UK, and I'm saying the creativity here is unreal. It's a shame to see that all being wasted just because they're not being given what they deserve. So I would like dancers to be more together as a community and to stand up as a community. And people can come to you, business people, even if they have a background of a dancer, can come to you and give you all these terms and inflation and talk about technical terms that you would think that they don't understand. But just make sure that you understand what they're saying and you hold them accountable. That would be my challenge.
That's great. Before we go, did you want to drop your socials? How can people get in touch with you?
Yes, you can message me on Instagram, Niss.Shuman, or I think, Roy, you can put my email address. It's quite long, so.
Yeah, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, I mean, financial literacy and dealing with finances has a lot of windows, and we touch base on a couple of them. But anything with regards to contracts, invoicing, chasing for payment when clients haven't paid you, I am more than happy to help out, because I genuinely think that businesses need to start understanding and respecting how they treat artists.
Well, this was a pleasure. Once again, thank you to Everything Anisha Studio for hosting the episode for today. My name is Roy. I'm the host of the Unplugged podcast, and this is season 2, episode 2 with Niss Shuman. And we will see you guys next week.